The afternoon light slanted through the lace curtains of the Whitmore estate, painting the room in a soft gold that made everything. The mahogany furniture, the family portraits, the dust of old memories looked deceptively gentle. Margaret Maggie Whitmore sat in her high-backed chair, posture perfect, pearls resting like armor against her throat. At 72, she was still formidable. Silver hair pinned precisely, eyes as sharp as the cut-glass decanter beside her. "Another overdraft notice," she murmured, folding the letter with a hand that did not tremble. "Daniel must think I'm already dead." Her longtime housekeeper, Ruth, lingered in the doorway, sensing the storm beneath that calm voice. "You've carried them all too long, Miss Maggie." "Maybe it's time to let them stand on their own." Maggie's lips curved, not into a smile, but into something more brittle. "And watch them fall?" "No, Ruth. The Whitmores don't collapse. Not while I'm still breathing." She turned her gaze to the garden, where roses she'd planted 40 years ago bloomed in stubborn defiance. They were like her, surviving neglect, drought, and pruning hands that never understood their roots. That evening, her phone rang, Emily's sweet, hopeful voice on the line. "Grandma, I'm getting married. In Charleston. It'll be perfect." For a brief moment, Maggie's steel softened. Her granddaughter was her pride, her last chance to make something right. "Of course, darling," she said, already knowing what Emily would ask next. "We'll make it the wedding of your dreams." As she hung up, Maggie looked toward her husband's portrait. The late Charles Whitmore, smiling from another, easier century. "One more time, Charlie," she whispered. "One more time to hold this family together." Outside, thunder rolled faintly in the distance. A warning, but also a promise. The Whitmore mansion buzzed with a rare kind of energy. The restless, glittering hum of wedding preparation. Florists, planners, and caterers flooded through the doors like a polite invasion. Ribbons of white lace trailed across antique furniture, champagne chilled in crystal flutes that hadn't been touched since Charles's funeral. But beneath the surface of elegance, tension coiled like a hidden snake. From the parlor, Daniel Whitmore's laughter echoed, too loud, too desperate. His breath carried the faint scent of bourbon before noon. "Mother, you're going overboard," he said, slouched on the settee as invoices stacked beside Maggie's teacup. "It's just a wedding, not a royal coronation." Maggie didn't look up from her ledger. "A Whitmore wedding," she corrected. "And that means something, even if you've forgotten what." From across the room, Chloe, Daniel's immaculately dressed wife, adjusted her diamond bracelet and smiled with the kind of sweetness that could curdle cream. "I think Mother's just trying to stay relevant," she said lightly, turning to a decorator. "She does love a little attention." Maggie's pen froze mid-sentence. The decorator shifted awkwardly, sensing the temperature drop. "I'll see to the flowers," he mumbled, escaping. Later that afternoon, Emily arrived, her face glowing with excitement and nerves. "Grandma, it's coming together. Tyler's family is thrilled." Maggie touched her granddaughter's cheek. "So am I, darling. Let's make it perfect." But behind her smile was a shadow of unease she couldn't quite name. From the hallway, Maggie overheard Daniel's voice, hushed and venomous. "If she keeps spending like this, there won't be anything left to inherit." Chloe's reply was a silken whisper. "Then maybe it's time someone took control." Outside, rain began to fall over the magnolias, soft but steady, the first drops of the storm to come. The rehearsal dinner glowed beneath chandeliers that dripped light like liquid gold. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, and a string quartet hummed something elegant in the background. Everything shimmered with expensive perfection, except for Maggie Whitmore's unease. She moved through the crowd like a queen at her own court, gracious and smiling, though her eyes missed nothing. Daniel had already gone through 2 tumblers of whiskey. Chloe fluttered from guest to guest, her laughter ringing just a little too brightly. And Emily, radiant in her ivory dress, kept glancing toward the door, searching for Tyler, the groom who had a habit of arriving late and leaving early. When the dinner seating began, Maggie reached for her place card and froze. In neat, looping script, it read, "The old lady paying for everything." For a moment, the sound around her vanished. The quartet kept playing, but it felt distant, like a memory dissolving underwater. Then came the laughter, soft at first, then growing. A few guests stifled giggles behind napkins. Chloe's red lips curled around the rim of her champagne flute. "Must be a joke," someone muttered. Maggie's fingers trembled only once before she steadied them. She placed the card down carefully, as if it were made of glass. Across the table, Emily's face flushed crimson. "Grandma, I swear I didn't." "I know, darling," Maggie said smoothly, her voice calm enough to silence the whispers. Someone has a very strange sense of humor. But behind her cool smile, a storm brewed. She looked around the table. At Daniel's nervous fidgeting, Chloe's smug glance, the groom's absent seat, and felt something shift inside her. This wasn't a joke. It was a message. And whoever had sent it had no idea what kind of woman they'd just provoked. Morning crept over Charleston with a deceptive calm. Gulls crying above the harbor, sunlight spilling across the Grand Hotel's veranda. But inside Maggie Whitmore's suite, the air was thick with quiet fury. The humiliating name tag lay on her dressing table beside a half-finished cup of tea, its mockery still burning into her chest. Maggie's reflection stared back from the mirror, poised, flawless, unreadable. "They think I'm weak," she thought, fastening the pearl clasp at her throat. "They've mistaken grace for surrender." She began her day with the precision of a general preparing for war. While Daniel and Chloe entertained guests at breakfast, Maggie placed a discreet call to Robert Gaines, the family accountant. His hesitant tone told her everything before he said a word. "Mrs. Whitmore, there have been irregular withdrawals, quite substantial ones." Her grip on the receiver tightened. "Who authorized them?" A pause. Then softly, "Your son." Maggie's stomach dropped, but her voice remained level. "Thank you, Robert. That will be all." By the time she hung up, her rage had cooled into resolve. Downstairs, she found Daniel speaking in low tones to the wedding planner, a young man wringing his hands over, quote, "unexpected expenses." When he noticed her, Daniel's expression flickered with guilt, then arrogance. "Mother, shouldn't you be resting?" "Resting?" she said smoothly. "Not when my money's working harder than I am." His eyes widened, but before he could answer, Chloe appeared, looping her arm through his. "Oh, Maggie," she cooed, "don't stress over details. You'll give yourself wrinkles." Maggie smiled thinly. "My dear, it's deceit that ages a person. You might want to be careful." As the couple walked away, whispering furiously, Maggie turned toward the window. She could feel the tide shifting, secrets beginning to rot in the light. And she was done being everyone's silent benefactor. The matriarch was awake. By the next evening, Maggie Whitmore had mastered her disguise, calm, gracious, and utterly unbothered. On the surface, she floated through the final wedding rehearsals like the perfect grandmother, offering compliments, signing checks, and smiling for photographs. But beneath that porcelain exterior, suspicion throbbed like a hidden pulse. Emily's voice broke through her thoughts. "Grandma, can we talk?" Her tone carried a tremor. Maggie nodded, leading her to the balcony overlooking the gardens. "Tyler's been distant," Emily confessed, twisting her engagement ring. "He says it's stress, but sometimes I catch him on the phone, whispering, and he won't tell me who it is." Maggie's stomach tightened. "You love him?" "Of course," Emily said, but her eyes darted away. "I think he loves me too." That was the lie young hearts told when truth became unbearable. Maggie kissed her granddaughter's forehead gently. "Let me look into it, darling. Just enjoy your day." Later that night, after Emily retired, Maggie called in a favor, an old acquaintance from her late husband's law firm, Frank Delaney, who still owed her a debt of gratitude. By morning, his report arrived. Tyler Benson's finances were a wreck. Gambling debts, credit defaults, a repossessed condo, and one more chilling note: multiple transfers from a shared account with Chloe Whitmore. Maggie's hand went cold around the paper. So it was true. Her daughter-in-law had not only orchestrated the cruel name tag, she'd enlisted Emily's groom in a plot to secure her fortune. That evening, Maggie watched them all from across the ballroom. Chloe whispering to Tyler, Daniel oblivious, Emily glowing in her innocence. For the first time in years, Maggie smiled not from pride, but from resolve. The Whitmore wedding would proceed, yes, but it would end her way. And when it did, no one in that room would ever forget who Margaret Whitmore truly was. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and deceptively peaceful. Charleston's church bells tolled in the distance as sunlight poured across white rose petals scattered on the lawn. The Whitmore name gleamed on the invitation cards, embroidered on napkins, etched into crystal flutes. From the outside, it was perfection. But inside Maggie Whitmore's chest, a storm gathered strength. She moved through the bridal suite with deliberate calm, adjusting Emily's veil, complimenting Chloe's choice of decor, even thanking Daniel for, quote, keeping the expenses reasonable. Each word was dipped in honey, sweet enough to hide the poison underneath. "Mother, you're being unusually gracious," Daniel said with a smirk. Maggie's eyes met his in the mirror. "A wedding brings out the best in people," she replied softly. "And sometimes, the truth." The ceremony itself unfolded like a fairy tale. Emily glided down the aisle, radiant and trembling, while Tyler waited at the altar with a smile too polished to be real. Maggie watched, silent, her expression unreadable. When the priest declared them husband and wife, applause rippled through the garden. But Maggie's mind was already rehearsing every word of her toast, the one no one expected. At the reception, the ballroom glittered under chandeliers, laughter echoing like champagne bubbles. Guests danced, oblivious to the ticking tension beneath their feet. When the band struck a softer tune, the wedding planner approached Maggie. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you ready for your speech?" She stood, pearls catching the light. "Yes," she said, voice cool and certain. "Let's give them a night they'll remember." Across the room, Chloe froze mid-laugh. Tyler's smile faltered. Emily's eyes sparkled with love, and fear of something she couldn't name. The matriarch lifted her glass. The storm had arrived. The ballroom shimmered beneath 1,000 lights, but when Maggie Whitmore rose to speak, it felt as if every bulb dimmed to a hush. Forks paused mid-air. Conversations died mid-laugh. Even the band's soft melody stumbled to silence. She stood there, a vision of composure in ivory silk, pearls gleaming like armor, champagne flute in hand. "My dearest family," she began, her voice carrying across the marble floor, smooth as velvet, sharp as glass. "What a beautiful day. Emily, my darling, you are every inch the bride your grandfather would have adored." She paused, letting the warmth settle before she struck. But love, true love, is not built on borrowed money or borrowed hearts. The words hung like smoke. Chloe stiffened. Tyler's smile cracked. "For years," Maggie continued, "I've given this family everything. My fortune, my patience, my name. And in return, I've been called, well," she lifted her name tag from her pocket, holding it high, "the old lady paying for everything." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Emily buried her face in her hands. Maggie's tone hardened. "I may be old, but I'm not blind. I know about the money taken, the debts concealed, and the lies told beneath my own roof. So I decided to give you all exactly what you've earned." She placed the flute down with surgical precision. "Last week, I changed my will. The Whitmore fortune, every dollar, now belongs to the Eleanor Grace Foundation for Women. None of you will inherit a cent." The silence that followed was electric, almost sacred. Then chaos erupted. Daniel shouting, Chloe collapsing into her chair, Tyler paling to ghost white. Maggie simply smiled, a glimmer of triumph in her eyes. "Consider it my final investment," she said softly, "in something that still deserves my name." The ballroom that had once glittered with laughter now rang with chaos. Gasps turned to shouts, and shouts to sobs. Champagne flutes shattered on marble floors, silk gowns rustled like storm winds. The orchestra stopped mid-note as if afraid to play a soundtrack for what had just exploded before them. Daniel Whitmore surged to his feet, face blotched crimson. "You can't do this, Mother. You can't just—" "I just did," Maggie said coolly, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Chloe tried to stand, but her heels wobbled. "This is humiliation. You've destroyed this family." Maggie turned her icy gaze toward her daughter-in-law. "I didn't destroy it, dear. I merely stopped funding the illusion." Cameras flashed as guests fumbled for their phones. Some were scandalized, others thrilled. All spellbound, Tyler, pale and sweating, reached for Emily's trembling hand. Baby, please, you know I love you. This doesn't change us. Emily looked at him through tears, the diamond on her finger suddenly heavy. It changes everything, she whispered. Then, with a sound that silenced even the murmurs, she slapped him, once, clean and sharp, before tearing off her ring and letting it fall to the floor. Maggie watched, pride glinting behind the ache in her chest. Her granddaughter's innocence had finally burned away, leaving strength in its place. Daniel stormed toward her, voice hoarse. You'll regret this. I've spent my life regretting too little honesty, she replied, lifting her chin. Tonight, I'm correcting that. And with that, Maggie Whitmore walked out, pearls gleaming under the chandeliers, the click of her heels echoing like punctuation to the family's ruin. Behind her, the empire she'd built collapsed in whispers and camera flashes. Ahead, through the open doors, the cool night air waited, clean, unspoiled, and hers alone. The morning after the wedding scandal, Charleston woke to headlines that glistened with humiliation. The Whitmore wedding meltdown, screamed the tabloids. Photos of Maggie Whitmore's poised face mid-toast splashed across every gossip column, while videos of Daniel shouting and Chloe fainting spread like wildfire. Society, ever hungry for drama, feasted on the fall of the Whitmores. But inside her quiet townhouse on East Bay Street, Maggie sat by the window, sipping coffee as the sunlight streamed across the polished wood. There was no regret in her eyes, only a weary calm. The silence felt strange, but beautiful, like the end of a long storm. Across town, Emily hadn't left her apartment in 2 days. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from friends, reporters, even Tyler, all unanswered. Shame clung to her like a veil. But when she finally saw her grandmother's photo in the paper, that serene expression, those unbroken eyes, something inside her began to shift. Meanwhile, Daniel faced a far crueler reckoning. The accountant's records, now in the hands of the authorities, exposed every dollar he'd siphoned from his mother's trust. Chloe's social circle turned on her with the speed of falling dominoes. Her charity invitations evaporated, her friends stopped calling. And Maggie? She began spending her mornings at the women's shelter she'd endowed, the Eleanor Grace Foundation. There, she poured tea for women who had nothing, yet smiled with genuine gratitude. Something she hadn't seen from her own family in years. One evening as she locked up the shelter, Ruth, her loyal housekeeper, said softly, "You gave them everything, Miss Maggie. Now you're finally giving it to the right people." Maggie smiled faintly. It took me 70 years to learn where generosity belongs. Outside, the city lights shimmered across the harbor, gentle and forgiving, a promise that even ashes can glow. A week after the storm, the world had begun to move on. But the Whitmores' name still lingered in whispers. The family estate stood empty, its windows dark, its garden untended, a monument to pride and consequence. Only one person had found peace in the wreckage. Margaret Maggie Whitmore, who now spent her mornings at the Eleanor Grace Foundation, arranging flowers and serving breakfast to women rebuilding their lives. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, a hesitant knock sounded at the door. Maggie opened it to find Emily, eyes swollen from tears, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers. Imperfect, but sincere. "Grandma," she whispered. "I didn't know where else to go." For a moment, Maggie said nothing. Then she stepped aside, her tone soft. "You came to the right place." Inside, surrounded by the hum of the shelter, laughter, the clink of dishes, the murmur of survival, Emily finally broke down. "I was so blind. I thought marrying Tyler would make me happy, that love could fix everything. But I hurt you most of all." Maggie cupped her granddaughter's face, her voice trembling just slightly. "You didn't hurt me, sweetheart. You reminded me why I needed to stop rescuing people who didn't want saving." Emily's tears turned into quiet sobs against her shoulder. "Can we start over?" Maggie smiled. Not the polite smile of society, but something warm and real. "We already have." Later they sat together on the porch overlooking the harbor, watching the sun dip below the water. The air smelled of salt and magnolia. Maggie took a deep breath and whispered, almost to herself, "All my life I paid for everything. Weddings, mistakes, forgiveness. But this peace?" She exhaled, serene. "This one's free." The waves rolled gently against the shore, carrying away the last of the Whitmore legacy, leaving behind only love, unbought and unbroken.